Welcome to Underwire History. The year is 1756, a time of great upheaval in London's bustling ports. The 7 Years' War rages on, and Britain's naval dominance is beginning to show signs of strain. Trade disruptions, rising shipping costs, and a growing sense of maritime insecurity have sparked concerns among merchants and sailors alike. In this context, the British government has already taken steps to address these issues by establishing a more formalized system for merchant vessels to obtain licenses and comply with regulations. However, there is still a pressing need to support those who work at sea, particularly in times of hardship or crisis, and provide them with access to vital resources such as food, clothing, and medical care. This was the catalyst for the creation of the Marine Society, a seafarers' charity that would go on to become the world's oldest institution dedicated to supporting those who work at sea. But what drives this initiative? Is it simply a philanthropic gesture, or are there more practical considerations at play? The answer lies in the complex web of interests and motivations that shape the decisions of governments, merchants, and sailors alike. It is here, at the intersection of power, profit, and people, where we find the true story of the Marine Society's founding. Here is the rewritten section. The 7 Years' War has taken a devastating toll on British shipping, with losses mounting and trade disruptions crippling the economy. Governments are scrambling to respond, but their efforts often prioritize the interests of wealthy merchants over those of sailors and ordinary people. As a result, the need for support services such as food, clothing, and medical care has become increasingly pressing among seafarers. However, governments are hesitant to assume responsibility for these costs, instead pushing them onto charities or private benefactors. This creates a complex web of interests, where philanthropy is often driven by ulterior motives, such as promoting British trade or bolstering national security. The Marine Society's founders must navigate this delicate balance, weighing the benefits of charitable work against the competing demands of governments and merchants. Their task is complicated further by the lack of clear data on maritime mortality rates, which makes it difficult to justify the need for extensive support services. The consequences of inaction are stark. Seafarers without access to basic necessities will suffer disproportionately from disease, injury, or even death at sea. This crisis point sets the stage for the Marine Society's creation, as those seeking solutions must reconcile competing pressures and priorities. The Marine Society is founded in London, the world's oldest seafarers' charity, unfolded through interacting constraints rather than one isolated trigger. Decision-makers operated within institutional limits, and each response narrowed the next available option. The evidence points to compounding risk rather than a single dramatic cause. That causal chain becomes clearer when incentives, governance, and timing are read together. Consequences and response reshaped what decision-makers could do next, because each institutional response changed the incentives facing the next actor. The legacy of the Marine Society lives on through contemporary charitable organizations that aid seafarers, including the Mission to Seafarers and the Sailors' Society. These organizations face similar challenges today, including balancing competing interests and navigating complex regulatory environments. Their work highlights the ongoing need for comprehensive support services, underscoring the Marine Society's enduring relevance in addressing the unique needs of seafarers. The consequences of this neglect began to manifest immediately. Reports started surfacing about the distressing conditions faced by seafarers on board ships. Media outlets highlighted the plight of workers who were struggling to access basic necessities like food, water, and healthcare. The public's attention was drawn to the issue as a result of these stories. The outrage sparked a wave of criticism towards shipping companies and governments for their inaction. This backlash led to increased scrutiny on regulatory bodies, which were accused of failing to enforce existing laws and standards. Parliamentarians from various countries launched inquiries into the matter, seeking answers and accountability from those responsible. Shipping industry's reputations suffered as a result of this public outcry. Companies began to feel the financial pinch due to declining consumer trust and increased scrutiny from regulatory bodies. Governments were also forced to respond, with some nations imposing stricter regulations on shipping companies and others investing in new initiatives aimed at supporting seafarers. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, became increasingly involved in addressing this crisis. The IMO worked closely with governments, shipping companies, and other stakeholders to develop a comprehensive set of guidelines for seafarer welfare. These guidelines included provisions for improving living and working conditions on board ships, as well as measures for enhancing access to healthcare and social services. The development of these guidelines marked a significant turning point in the response to this crisis. It signified a shift towards more proactive and collaborative efforts among stakeholders. This newfound willingness to work together paved the way for further innovations in seafarer welfare initiatives. Many shipping companies now integrate seafarer welfare into their corporate social responsibility efforts, building on the long-standing legacy of organizations that assist seafarers with specialized care and resources. Regulatory bodies continue to grapple with balancing competing interests and navigating complex regulatory environments. This balancing act highlights the enduring relevance of the Marine Society's mission, as it faces similar challenges today as it did in its early days. Marine Charity's ongoing commitment to seafarer welfare highlights the enduring value of holistic assistance programs. The outrage sparked a wave of criticism towards shipping companies and governments for their inaction. This backlash led to increased scrutiny on regulatory bodies, which were accused of failing to enforce existing laws and standards. Parliamentarians from various countries launched inquiries into the matter, seeking answers and accountability from those responsible. Shipping industry's reputations suffered as a result of this public outcry. Companies began to feel the financial pinch due to declining consumer trust and increased scrutiny from regulatory bodies. Governments were also forced to respond, with some nations imposing stricter regulations on shipping companies and others investing in new initiatives aimed at supporting seafarers. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, became increasingly involved in addressing this crisis. The IMO worked closely with governments, shipping companies, and other stakeholders to develop a comprehensive set of guidelines for seafarer welfare. These guidelines included provisions for improving living and working conditions on board ships, as well as measures for enhancing access to healthcare and social services. Shipping companies now emphasize seafarer well-being in their corporate values and charitable outreach efforts, building on a tradition pioneered by the Marine Society. The development of these guidelines was a result of intense negotiations between various stakeholders. The IMO played a crucial role in facilitating dialogue and finding common ground among shipping companies, governments, and other organizations. Key actors involved in this process included the World Shipping Council, WSC, which provided critical insights into industry best practices, and the International Transport Workers Federation, ITF, which advocated for improved working conditions and better compensation for seafarers. The guidelines also addressed issues such as overcapacity and crew fatigue, which were major concerns at the time. The adoption of these measures marked a significant step forward in improving the welfare of seafarers worldwide. The impact of this crisis can be seen in the increased attention paid to labor rights and working conditions within the shipping industry. It has also led to greater awareness among consumers about the social and environmental implications of their purchasing decisions. The development of these guidelines was a result of intense negotiations between various stakeholders. The guidelines also addressed issues such as overcapacity and crew fatigue, which were major concerns at the time. The adoption of these measures marked a significant step forward in improving the welfare of seafarers worldwide. The impact of this crisis can be seen in the increased attention paid to labor rights and working conditions within the shipping industry. It has also led to greater awareness among consumers about the social and environmental implications of their purchasing decisions. Today, many shipping companies prioritize seafarer welfare as part of their brand identity and corporate social responsibility strategies. The tradition established by the Marine Society still shapes contemporary organizations serving sailors. Governments have also established independent monitoring bodies to oversee the implementation of these guidelines and ensure accountability within the industry. These organizations play a crucial role in providing support services, investigating incidents, and promoting best practices among shipping companies. A collaborative approach from governments, industries, and civil groups is essential for meeting the distinct needs of sailors. As global trade continues to evolve, it is essential that we prioritize the welfare of those who make it possible: the sailors, the dockworkers, and the thousands of others who work tirelessly behind the scenes to keep our world connected. The guidelines had an unintended consequence of creating a false sense of security among shipping companies, leading some to relax their standards and compromise on seafarer welfare. This attitude was fueled by a growing perception that the industry's profitability was being threatened by increasing regulations and costs. In 1965, the International Maritime Organization, IMO, published its first set of guidelines for tanker safety, which included recommendations for double-hull designs to prevent oil spills. However, many shipping companies resisted these changes, arguing that they would be too expensive to implement. As a result, some ships were still operating with single-hull designs, posing a significant risk to the environment and human life. The consequences of this inaction became evident in 1969, when the oil tanker Torrey Canyon ran aground off the coast of England, causing one of the worst environmental disasters in history. In response to this tragedy, the IMO adopted even stricter regulations for tanker safety, including a ban on single-hull designs. But these new standards only added to the industry's growing list of constraints, further reducing the number of viable options for shipping companies. The Marine Society's legacy had been built upon a foundation of cooperation between governments, industries, and civil society organizations. However, as global trade continued to evolve, it became clear that this collaborative effort was not enough to address the unique challenges faced by seafarers. A report by the International Transport Workers Federation, ITF, in 1967 highlighted the growing concerns about seafarer welfare, including issues related to working conditions, wages, and social isolation. The ITF's findings were echoed by the results of a survey conducted by the International Chamber of Shipping, ICE, which revealed that many shipping companies were struggling to meet the increasing regulatory demands without compromising on profitability. This tension between regulation and profitability was fueled by the rise of containerization, which had transformed the industry in the 1960s by reducing labor costs and increasing efficiency. However, this shift towards automation and rationalization also led to a decline in employment opportunities for seafarers, further exacerbating their already precarious working conditions. The IMO's guidelines for tanker safety were seen as another example of regulatory overreach by some shipping companies, who argued that the cost of compliance would be too high. This perception was not without merit, given the significant investment required to meet the new standards for double-hull designs and other safety measures. Yet the consequences of inaction were stark, as evidenced by the Torrey Canyon disaster and subsequent environmental disasters. Thanks for listening to Underwire History. Look forward to seeing you next time.